Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another video lecture starring Mrs. Hayes. And tonight, or whenever you're looking at this, you are going to be listening to and writing down some information about how the ratification of the Constitution took place. And I'm going to be giving you some information about some of the opposing viewpoints, some of the things that governments have a purpose in carrying out for their citizens, and I'm going to leave you with one question that I would like you to think about as we approach next week. So we're going to begin with a little bit of a discussion about what the purposes of government really are. And I'm going to take this off. I know it looks cool, my tri-cornered hat, but I think I can talk a little bit better if I just have my hair showing. So as I was saying, there are really three things that all governments are responsible for. Three things that Americans or any citizens of a country want from their government. And that's true whether you're talking about a democracy like the United States, a constitutional monarchy like England, a communist government like Russia or Cuba or China, or even some of the religious theocracies we've seen in the Middle East. The first thing, and I suggest you write this down, the first thing that all people really want, and the goal of a government is to provide protection. And protection can come in the form of physical protection, like protecting someone's safety through the use of an army or a navy. It could mean protection of their rights through the use of laws. It could mean protecting them from some other kind of physical danger, like through the police or firemen or, anything like that. And generally, protection is what is upmost in our mind as individuals and as families. The second important thing that is a purpose or goal of government is to keep order. And keeping order means having laws, understanding that there are boundaries that people are understanding in order to guide their actions. And when you break those boundaries and break those laws, there's going to be some way to adjust for you, who may have committed a crime, to have a trial by jury and have that done in an orderly process. And if you are found guilty, that you may have to pay a fine. You may have to serve time in jail or prison. Those are ways of keeping order. And then the third thing, which is important to citizens, is that government provide them with some sense of services. And if you are a citizen who pays taxes or pays some sort of tithe to a government, whether it be local, state, or federal, you would expect something in return for that. So services might mean the upkeep of our roads, making sure that the roads are cleared in inclement weather. It might mean fire service, police patrols. It might mean taking care of sanitation and garbage disposal, making sure that the things that are used to protect and keep order are also paid for as a service to the citizens. So I would commit these three things to memory: protection, keeping order, services. Those are three things that all citizens want from their government. And in an American government like ours, we have created a system by which the Constitution provides a measure of protection, a measure of keeping order, and a measure of service. So as we're going through this next unit and we're talking about the Constitution, understand that those three things are highly important. Those are the three things that the colonists wanted when they revolted against England. That's what they attempted to get through the Articles of Confederation, but were not successful. And now with the Constitution, that's their goal and their aim as they enter this Constitutional Convention and try to compromise with each other over some very big topics. Now, after the Constitutional Convention is over and the compromises have been laid out and the Constitution is written by James Madison, it is the job of every state to put together a convention and to ratify or approve that Constitution. The Constitution said in Article 7 that they needed 9 out of 13 states to ratify the Constitution. But the government that would be created out of this new document would not be a very trusting government if just 9 of the 13 states were to ratify. You would want all 13 states to say, yes, we believe in this, and we're going to put our trust and we're going to put our faith in this new democratic nation, in this new democratic republic. So you have to understand that after the convention, it isn't just posting up the Constitution and saying, okay, this is the law of the land, this is supreme, nothing else is above it. It means that now the states have to decide that this is truly what they're going to put their faith behind. So we're going to talk about today that there were 2 viewpoints of how the government under this new Constitution was going to be seen. And, we honor the Constitution and understand what a guiding force this has been to create a national government whose primary aim was to promote freedom. But given the sad record in history today, in world history and global history, you studied governments that came and went in many countries, often with very brutal consequences for their citizens. So this kind of a stable central or federal government has proven to be a real mainstay to our nation's democracy. And the Constitution, while it is very valuable and seen as a real triumph in 1787, almost didn't become the law of the land. They had opponents who had some very valid arguments about how they felt this Constitution would work or wouldn't work. And so the first group that I'd like you to understand is a group called the Anti-Federalists. Anti-Federalists. Against Federalists. So if you want, maybe in your notes, you want to make a T-chart with Federalists on one side and Anti-Federalists on the other. And we're going to start with the Anti-Federalists because they were the dissenters. They were the resistors. That doesn't mean that they were bad people. They simply had some questions. And they had a belief in smaller, simpler, more local government. They believed that the government, if it was created in a very strong, central way, that it could very easily take power away from a city or a state or a region, and it would be increasingly difficult to watch what government officials were doing. And since the government officials often wanted to make their power greater, citizens would have to keep an eye on them. Otherwise, taxes might be spent in an unwise way, and it would fatten the wallets of the rich and the well-connected, and maybe pretty soon people's liberties, their natural rights, would eventually decline. So the Anti-Federalists feared large, big government. The Anti-Federalists also believed that the new government with a president, a Congress, and a Supreme Court was way too complex. The more simple and local a government could be, they thought it would be much more responsive to the needs of the people. They also believed that the middle class, made up of farmers, artisans, craftsmen, businessmen, and others should help run the government. They thought that the new government's size and very complex nature with three branches would only benefit the rich and would encourage the growth of some maybe corrupt special interest groups. They felt it would almost increase the chance that a new kind of aristocracy, a new form of government would rise up, and it would look very much like the British monarchy. So they were worried that the wealthy, the educated, the well-connected would really just become another British monarchy. And then the Anti-Federalists were worried that this really wouldn't be a nation of equality. They wanted the founding fathers, who helped to create the Declaration of Independence and eventually the Articles, would stay true to what their beliefs were. And their beliefs really were centered around direct democracy. So those are the Anti-Federalists. Those are the people that had some questions about such a strong central or federal government. And you can use those words interchangeably. Now let's switch gears and let's go to the Federalists. Make the other side of your T-chart. They thought that they were the rightful heirs, the rightful owners to this new government because they had fought in the Revolution. They said that the reason why they wanted a strong central government is because a stronger national or central government would be more helpful to liberty than hurtful. They felt that anarchy, chaos, came out of the Articles because the Articles made the federal government much too weak. We saw that with Shays' Rebellion. They said a weak central government doesn't benefit anybody, not the rich or the poor. They said if you separate the powers of the three branches and you have each branch get one role, legislative branch making laws, executive enforcing, judicial judging or interpreting, you're actually going to prevent the growth or dominance of one branch, and you're going to be able to not have that concentration of power in one place. People wouldn't be apt to make bad decisions because they have to make them in conjunction with each other. That's called checks and balances. So this is how they felt, that the Constitution in and of itself, the Federalists did, felt that the Constitution was a good, solid document. It had everything it needed in there to prevent the very things that they felt the Anti-Federalists were worried about. So as these state conventions begin to meet and they begin to ratify or approve the Constitution, they realize that they get to that number 9, and that's fine, but you still have 4 states that are kind of holding out and not very quickly ratifying. And so they feel, the Federalists feel, that they have to do something. And a group of them, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, James Madison, all begin to write a series of essays known as the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers. And together, the 3 of them write a set of essays that become a book and that people read and they hope will help to take those states who are on the fence about ratifying the Constitution and push them over the fence to ratify the Constitution. Those important essays, known as the Federalist Papers, are very much like what we saw Thomas Paine do during the Revolution with Common Sense. That pamphlet, Common Sense, pushed the neutrals over the fence to be able to fight for independence with the Patriots. So the Federalist Papers were a way for people in the 4 lone holdout states, 2 of which were Virginia and New York, to finally meet and understand how important the ratification of this document was. And this next week, we're going to be looking at some of those important Federalist Papers and what kind of wording did they use, what did they say in there to make it clear to people that ratification was necessary. So the lone holdouts, Virginia and New York, were insistent that something had to be added to the Constitution after they ratified it, but that they would count on happening because they felt it was so important. And the one thing that those anti-federalists wanted, and I think it didn't matter whether those anti-federalists were in the states who had already ratified or the 2 or 3 that were still holdouts, Rhode Island, New York, Virginia, they wanted a Bill of Rights. That was it. They said, we'll ratify, but in the next couple of years, you must promise to add a Bill of Rights, which they did. And so we know today that had it not been for the Anti-Federalists, we wouldn't have, at least written into the Constitution, things like your basic freedoms of speech and press, assembly, petition, religion, right to a trial by jury. So the Federalists ultimately win the debate. They get the Constitution ratified. It was a difficult struggle. But they also have to compromise with the Anti-Federalists by agreeing to write in these 10 amendments, the first 10 amendments, to the Constitution known as the Bill of Rights. The final and 13th state was Rhode Island. Rhode Island finally did ratify, but not more than a year after the new government had already begun to operate. And the reason why they did is because the government of the United States said to Rhode Island, we're not going to trade with you anymore if you don't ratify pretty soon. So by a very slim margin, like say 34 to 32 in their state conventions, Rhode Island did finally ratify the Constitution. So this was a very great debate between those who felt a strong central government was detrimental to the life of our nation and those who wanted to protect the rights of the states and the individuals. And this continues today in 2013, soon to be 2014. Every day in newspapers, on TV, in the internet, in schoolrooms, in offices, people debate how do we help to create a government that is responsive to the needs of people and helps people and is very effective in preserving our liberties, yet is strong enough to be able to rule over, the billions of people that we have living in the United States. But being free to express our opinions about the way the nation should be run helps us to resolve those issues peacefully. Having that freedom of speech allows us to support and also to criticize. And it keeps the government responsive to us because they learn what we think about what they're doing. And that's extremely important. If we can learn to see the wisdom in both sides of those debate, then we're in a better position to work out solutions that can be better for government and can be better just in life in general. So, the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists are 2 opposing viewpoints in the ratification of the Constitution. Both added very good, solid viewpoints to the debate, and luckily enough for us, we were able to achieve the goal of ratifying the Constitution, plus adding to it that very important component known as the Bill of Rights. All right, so just to recap, 3 purposes of government: protection, keeping order, services, and I have given you some examples. We talked about how the ratification of the Constitution had to take place through each state having a convention, and that they needed at least 9 of the 13 states to ratify, but eventually all 13 states do ratify the Constitution. And we talked about the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists and what kinds of things they believed in, both sides believed in, and how they finally came to some resolution to finalize the ratification of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So here's my last question for you to be thinking about. We have seen throughout our study of the colonies, the Revolution, our separation from England. We've looked at how the Declaration of Independence was so important, how the Articles of Confederation in some cases was a success, but most generally a failure, and then how the Constitutional Convention had brought us to this spot of creating a brand new government. And the question I have for you to think about and maybe write down and put some, thought to is that our founding fathers, those Washingtons, those Jeffersons, Ben Franklins, John Adams, Samuel Adams, were part of this colonial elite that took us through a very tough time, through a revolution, through a Declaration of Independence, and then into the establishment of a new nation. Once we create a new constitution, does the Constitution allow for a different group of people to become the ruling political party or ruling political elite? Or are they the same people? Are the founding fathers of the Revolution still the political elite of this new constitutional government? Have we allowed for greater diversity among this new political group? Are there middle class people involved? Are there women involved? Are there African Americans? Are there people who are landless that are involved in this new government? So I beg you the question, how has this transfer of power changed the United States of America? How has this new Constitution changed who's in charge and who is running this government that we have now given our trust and faith to? So that's the question. And I want you to think about it a little bit. You have a lot of information already, and it's a good thought-provoking question for this weekend as you look at some of the documents and as you write some of these notes from my video lecture. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. Please take down good notes. Stop where you need to. Annotate if you have a question or anything about what I've talked about we can bring up in class on Monday. And remember that last question. It will be important to you on Monday. So do your homework. If it's cold outside, I hope you stay warm. If it's warm outside, I hope you stay cool. And I'll see you next week. Bye.